A single second can feel like an infinity when it carries the weight of a life-changing choice and deep emotion. We capture those eternal moments and turn them into cinematic art for your viewing pleasure. Hit subscribe now and explore the infinite nature of the human story with us.
My son-in-law told his golf buddies that I reminded him of the guy who mows their lawn. He said it at my daughter's housewarming party, loud enough that 3 of his colleagues turned to look at me, then looked away just as fast. I was standing right there holding a casserole dish I'd driven 40 minutes to bring. I'm Gerald Morrow, 67 years old, and for the last 9 years, I have let my daughter believe that her father lives on a modest pension and the occasional handyman job. What my daughter Cassie never knew was that the little landscaping crew I mentioned once at Christmas dinner had grown into Morrow Land Group, a commercial landscaping and grounds management company operating across Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. With 1,800 employees and service contracts worth $76 million annually. When her husband Derek and his father sat me down last spring to walk me through why I should consider liquidating my property for the family's financial future, I didn't argue. I just nodded, drove home, and made 3 phone calls. If you're watching this, leave a comment and tell me where you're from, because this story is about what happens when the people closest to you decide your value before they ever bother to learn your name. Most people see the same thing Derek sees when they look at me. A man in his late 60s who drives a faded green Chevy Silverado with a cracked side mirror and a tackle box behind the seat. Someone who owns 4 identical pairs of khaki work pants and wears New Balance shoes with velcro straps because they're easier on my ankles in the morning. I bring sweet tea in a thermos to family events and fall asleep during football games. I have a flip phone I refuse to upgrade because I can read the numbers without squinting. Derek Whitmore, 36 years old, finance director at a private equity firm in Houston, drives a leased BMW, and plays golf every Saturday at a club where the initiation fee costs more than my first truck. His father, Warren Whitmore, sold a regional insurance brokerage 12 years ago, reinvested the proceeds, and has spent every year since making sure everyone in his orbit understands that. Warren's wife Pamela volunteers on 2 nonprofit boards and corrects people's grammar at dinner parties. They are the kind of family that uses the word legacy as a verb. The first sign came about 14 months ago at Easter. Cassie and Derek had just moved into their new house in the Heights neighborhood in Houston, and Warren started referring to my place across town as the old Morrow property during a conversation about real estate values. Not my house, the old Morrow property. Like it was already something to be assessed and redistributed. The second sign came 6 weeks later, when Derek started asking careful questions about my finances. Not rude question. Careful ones. The kind that are shaped like concern. Dad, have you looked into whether your pension keeps pace with inflation? Dad, do you have someone helping you with your taxes? Dad, a lot of guys your age don't realize how quickly maintenance costs can stack up on older homes. I told him I was managing fine. He nodded slowly. The way people nod when they've already decided you're wrong. The third sign was the afternoon Cassie brought a woman named Trish over to see my house. Trish, it turned out, was a real estate agent and a close friend of Pamela Whitmore. Trish walked through my living room and my kitchen and my backyard with a yellow legal pad, writing things down and murmuring to herself. My backyard. The one with the 2 oak trees I planted the week Cassie was born. I asked what this was about. Cassie said they were just exploring options, getting a sense of the market, nothing serious. Trish measured my back porch while I was standing on it. Nothing serious, she said. You have wonderful bones here, Gerald. This lot alone is worth something significant. What none of them knew was that I had designed and installed the landscaping at the commercial complex where Derek's firm leased its office. What none of them knew was that every Wednesday I drove that old Silverado to our regional headquarters in Conroe, where 32 people reported directly to me. What none of them knew was that the irrigation system in my backyard, the one Trish had stepped over twice without noticing, was a prototype unit developed by our equipment division, now used in 7 hospital campuses across the Gulf Coast. I let them measure. I said nothing. The real turning point came on A Tuesday evening in March, when Derek and Cassie invited me to dinner, and Warren and Pamela were already there when I arrived. Nobody mentioned that part in advance. Warren stood up when I came in and shook my hand with both of his like we were concluding something. They had printed documents, not a full packet, just some pages folded in thirds, the way important things get folded when someone wants them to look less alarming than they are. "Gerald," Warren said, "we want to have an honest conversation about the future, about what makes sense for everyone." He gestured at the papers. "We've had a financial planner look at your situation. Based on your income profile, the equity in your home is really your primary asset. At your age, that equity is also your primary risk." I looked at the papers. They had estimated my monthly income. The number was not close. Cassie reached across the table and put her hand on my arm. "Dad, Derek and I have been talking for a long time about wanting to build something permanent, something we can raise our kids in." She glanced at Derek. "We're expecting," she said quietly. I looked at her. I hadn't known. That part landed differently. "Congratulations," I said. And I meant it. Derek pressed forward before the moment could settle. "Your house sits on nearly 3/4 of an acre. Gerald, the lot value alone in that zip code right now is extraordinary. We're not trying to push you out. We want to bring you along." Warren spread his hands. "There's a senior community about 20 minutes from here in Katy. Beautiful facility. Golf cart paths. They do group fishing trips on Fridays. I'm 67, I said. I still cut my own grass." Warren smiled patiently. "Gerald, no offense, but that's part of what concerns us. A man your age, alone, maintaining a property that size, on a fixed income. It's a lot." I let him finish. "And where would I go?" Cassie and Derek exchanged a look I recognized immediately, as rehearsed. "The numbers work out well for you," Derek said. "You'd walk away with a significant sum after the family transaction discount, enough to live very comfortably in a maintained community without any of the overhead." Warren leaned in. "We'd structure it so you're protected. This is about dignity, Gerald. Letting the next generation carry the weight, while you enjoy what you've earned." I asked what the family transaction discount meant exactly. It meant below market. It meant I would sell my home to my daughter and son-in-law at a price Warren's financial planner had determined was fair for someone in my income bracket. I nodded slowly. I told them I'd think about it. That night I sat in my backyard under the oak trees. I had taught Cassie to identify birds in that backyard. We used to keep a little notebook, her handwriting getting neater every year as she got older. The Carolina wren, the red-tailed hawk, the painted bunting, which she had decided was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen, and which still came to the feeder I'd put up near the fence. I thought about my daughter and about the woman she'd married into, and I let myself feel all of it before I went inside. The formal letter arrived 4 days later. It was on stationery from a firm called Whitmore and Associates Legal Group, which, I later confirmed, was operated by Warren's college roommate. The language was gentle in the way that things are gentle when they're designed to feel inevitable. It described a voluntary asset transition framework and a family wealth preservation agreement. It said that given my age, income level, and the assessed condition of the property, the proposed terms represented a generous and time-sensitive opportunity. It said the family hoped I would engage constructively with the process, and noted that Texas law included provisions that could be relevant if a property owner's capacity to manage their affairs became a concern. That last paragraph. Capacity to manage my affairs. I read it 3 times. Then I went to my home office, the one I'd told Cassie held my old woodworking tools, and I opened the filing cabinet I hadn't shown anyone since my wife passed 4 years ago. Articles of Incorporation for Morrowland Group, established 2009. Revenue statements showing $76 million in annual contracts. Bank records showing liquid holdings of $28.4 million across 3 accounts. A profile in Texas Business Monthly from 18 months ago with a photograph of me in a hard hat at a job site, headlined Quiet Giants. The family. Founded companies reshaping Gulf Coast commercial real estate. I laid it all on the desk and I made my calls. First call was to my attorney, a woman named Caroline Reyes, who had handled every major legal matter for our company for 11 years. "Caroline," I said, "my son-in-law's family has sent me a legal letter suggesting I may lack the capacity to manage my affairs unless I sign my home over to them below market value." She was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. "Send me the letter in the next hour," she said. "And Gerald, document everything from the last 6 months." I did. Second call was to my operations director, a man named Phil Carver, who had been with me since we had 12 employees and 1 used mower. "Phil," I said, "I need you to pull every active contract we hold with any entity connected to the name Whitmore in the greater Houston metro." He called back in 20 minutes. "Gerald, we've got 2. The Whitmore Capital Group office complex on Westheimer. Full grounds management, 3-year contract. About $180,000 annually. And the new Whitmore residential development in Pearland, Phase 1 and 2, landscape installation and ongoing maintenance, signed 8 months ago. Total contract value around $490,000. I want both terminated," I said. "Effective end of business Friday." Phil exhaled. "That's going to leave them in bad shape right before the Pearland project hits its public launch." "I know," I said. "Do it cleanly. Site capacity constraints. Refer them to our biggest competitor." Third call was to a man named Ray DeLuca, who ran the commercial real estate division at the firm where Derek worked. I had met Ray at an industry conference 3 years earlier. "Ray," I said, "I want to ask you something off the record." He said, "Of course. I want to know what the Whitmore Capital Group's office complex at Westheimer means to your firm's portfolio, and whether Derek Whitmore has been representing himself as having influence over that property relationship." There was a pause. "Gerald," Ray said carefully, "Derek has used that building's facility contract as a reference point in 2 internal pitches. He's implied the relationship is something he can leverage." "I thought so," I said. "I appreciate your time. I didn't call anyone else. 3 calls was enough. The rest I decided to do in person." The occasion was the Whitmore family's annual spring gathering, held at Warren and Pamela's house in River Oaks, 40 or 50 people. Cassie had asked me 3 times if I was coming, each time with a tone that suggested she was hoping I'd say no. I said I'd be there. I drove the Silverado. I wore khakis and a button-down I'd ironed myself. I parked next to Warren's Cadillac Escalade and carried the same thermos I always carry. Pamela met me at the door with a smile that was fully assembled before I arrived. "Gerald," she said, "we're so glad you could make it." "Of course," I said. Derek found me within 4 minutes. He was in a linen shirt and loafers without socks. "Dad," he said, "I'm glad you're here. There are some people I want you to meet." He was very calm. The calm of someone who believes the difficult part is already handled. He introduced me to a man named Scott Fielding, who was a real estate developer, and a man named Arthur Yuen, who ran a private equity fund, and a woman named Claire Tran, who was a portfolio manager at a wealth management firm. They shook my hand with the polite efficiency of people who are being gracious to someone they do not expect to have a meaningful conversation with. "So Gerald," Scott said, "Derek tells us you're retired." "Mostly," I said. "Little bit of property work here and there." Derek laughed lightly. "Dad's being modest. He's got a great little setup. Keeps himself busy." That phrase. Great little setup. Warren appeared with a glass of wine for Derek and a glass of sparkling water for me, which he handed over without asking what I wanted. Pamela called for attention from across the room. She was standing next to Derek and Cassie, one hand raised like a woman who has given many toasts. "Everyone, thank you all for being here. Warren and I are so proud of this family and so excited about what's ahead." She looked at Cassie. "As most of you know, Derek and Cassie are expecting their first child." Warm murmurs moved through the room, and she continued, "They've made a wonderful decision to put down real roots right here in Houston. Thanks to some very thoughtful planning and Gerald's generosity, they'll be breaking ground on a forever home later this year." She looked at me with a smile that was entirely manufactured. We're so grateful to Gerald for making this possible. The room looked at me. Cassie looked at me. I had not signed anything. I had not agreed to anything. Derek raised his glass slightly in my direction. "Dad, thank you," he said. "We know it's a big step." I set my thermos down on the nearest surface. "I have a question," I said. Not loud enough to shout. Loud enough that the people near me went quiet. And the quiet spread. "Scott Fielding," I said, turning to him. "Your development company. You have an office campus on Westheimer. Do you know who manages the grounds on that property?" He frowned. "I'm not sure I follow." "The grounds management company," I said. "The landscaping, irrigation, exterior maintenance. The contract that keeps that property looking the way it looks when your clients drive up." He glanced at Derek. "I don't handle those details personally. You might want to look into it," I said. "Because as of this Friday, the company that holds that contract is terminating its services." The room had gone quite still. Warren stepped forward. "Gerald, this is a celebration. Whatever concerns you have, we can discuss them privately." "I'm not here to discuss anything privately, Warren. You sent me a letter threatening to question my mental capacity if I didn't sell my house to your son below market. I'd like to address that publicly." His face went red along the jaw. That letter was a legal formality. It was a threat dressed up in legal language, I said. "And it was drafted by your college roommate's firm, which makes it a family project, not a formality." Derek moved toward me. "Dad, I think you're misunderstanding the intent here." "I understand it very clearly," I said. I turned back to the room. "My name is Gerald Morrow. I'm the founder and sole owner of Morrow Land Group, which manages commercial grounds and landscaping contracts across Texas, Oklahoma, and Louisiana. Current annual revenue is approximately $76 million. Personal net worth, including company equity, investment holdings, and real estate, is somewhere in the range of $95 million. The Whitmore Capital office on Westheimer is one of our accounts. It was. As of Friday, it won't be. The Whitmore residential development in Pearland was also one of our accounts. That contract is also being terminated effective Friday. Warren had stopped moving. Arthur Yuen, the private equity man, had taken out his phone. "That's not possible," Warren said. "You drive a truck." "Yes," I said. "A truck I own outright. Unlike the Escalade in your driveway, which I believe you're leasing." Pamela made a sound that was not quite a word. Derek's voice had changed register. "You're doing this because of the letter, because of the property conversation. You're punishing Cassie." "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "Cassie is having my grandchild, and I will be there for every moment of that child's life. But I will not be moved into a senior community with golf cart paths and group fishing trips because your father decided my life needed to be managed." I turned to face Derek directly. "You told your colleagues that the Whitmore Capital building relationship was something you could leverage. You used my company's contract as a credential you didn't earn and didn't understand. Ray DeLuca confirmed that for me 2 days ago." Derek's face went the color of old chalk. "You can't just pull those contracts," he said. "The Pearland development launches in 3 weeks. Finding a replacement vendor at this stage will set the project back significantly. It might make your firm wonder whether the facility relationships you've been citing are as solid as you've represented them to be," I said. Arthur Yuen was already texting. Scott Fielding had stepped away from our group and was speaking quietly into his phone. Warren pointed a finger at me. "You are burning this family down over a real estate conversation." "I am drawing a line, Warren. There's a difference." I looked at Cassie. She was standing very still with her hands in front of her and her eyes full of something I couldn't fully read. "Cassie," I said, "I love you. I have always loved you. And you are going to be a wonderful mother. But no one in this room or anywhere else gets to decide that I am a problem to be managed. Not while I'm standing upright and thinking clearly and running a company that pays 1,800 people's salaries." I picked up my thermos. I said goodnight to the room. I drove home in the Silverado with the windows down and the radio off and the Houston night air coming through the cab the way it does in late spring when the jasmine is out. The weeks that followed were not quiet. The Pearland development ran into vendor issues that pushed its launch back 6 weeks. Derek's firm conducted an internal review of how he'd characterized outside relationships in his pitches, and he was reassigned from 2 accounts he'd built his internal reputation on. Warren lost the Westheimer maintenance contract with no replacement vendor available on short notice, and the property's exterior began showing it within 10 days. Pamela stopped appearing on one of her nonprofit boards, though I don't know exactly why. Caroline Reyes sent a formal response to the Whitmore and Associates letter, citing 17 specific concerns and noting that any attempt to question my capacity would be met with a full legal response. I heard nothing back from them. Cassie called me on a Wednesday evening 3 weeks after the dinner party. Not a text. A call. "Dad," she said. "Can I come over?" "Yes," I said. "Come for dinner." She came alone. She sat at the kitchen table where she'd done her homework for 12 years, and she put her hands around a mug of tea, and she looked at me for a long moment before she spoke. "I didn't know about the letter," she said. "I want you to know that. I didn't know Warren's lawyer drafted it, and I didn't know they'd included that language about capacity." I said nothing. "And I should have asked more questions," she said. "About the property. About the financial planner. About all of it." Derek was excited and his parents were excited, and it started to feel like a plan before I understood what the plan actually was. She looked down at her mug. "I should have called you. I should have just called you and asked if you were okay and what you actually wanted. Instead, I brought a real estate agent to your backyard." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. I let the quiet sit for a moment. "You know what I was doing when you were born," I said. She shook her head. "I was in the middle of a job, a commercial install at a medical complex in Conroe. Your mother called me and I drove to the hospital with dirt still on my boots." She smiled a little. "I used to love that story." "I never told you that the company doing that install was mine," I said. "That by the time you started middle school, we had grown to something significant. I didn't tell you because your mother and I decided that we wanted you to build your own sense of what things are worth. We didn't want you measuring people by what they owned, including me." She was quiet. "Did it work?" she asked. "Mostly," I said. "You married someone whose father measures everything by what it costs." She laughed softly and then her eyes went serious again. "I'm going to talk to Derek," she said. "Really talk to him. Not about the company or the money. About what kind of people we want to be. About what I want our child to learn from watching us. That's the only conversation that matters," I said. Derek came to see me the following Sunday. He came alone, without his father, without documents, wearing jeans and a plain shirt, and carrying nothing. He sat across from me in the living room, and he looked genuinely uncomfortable in the way that is different from performance. "Mr. Morrow," he said. He had called me Gerald or Dad for 9 years. "Mr. Morrow." Morrow meant he understood we were starting over. I let him speak. "I made assumptions," he said. "About your life. About your finances. About what you needed and what you were capable of." He paused. My father framed all of it as practical, as taking care of business. And I let him frame it that way because it was easier than questioning him. He looked at the floor. "I leveraged your company's name in my firm without telling you. That was wrong, regardless of everything else. I used something of yours like it was mine." He looked up. "I'm sorry for that specifically. That specific thing." I said I heard him. "I want to rebuild this," he said. "I don't know exactly how. But Cassie wants to and I want to, and I'm asking for the chance to try." I looked at him for a long moment. "You're going to be a father," I said. "You're going to have a person in your life who watches everything you do and builds their understanding of the world from watching you. You have some months to figure out who you want to be when that happens." He nodded. "My father is going to push back on all of this," he said. "I know. That's going to have to be your problem to manage, not mine," I said. "It will be," he said. The following Saturday I drove to their house and I helped Derek build a raised garden bed in the backyard. His idea. He had bought the lumber and done the measurements himself. It wasn't square, and one side was a 1/4 inch short, and we had to recut a board. He didn't call a contractor. He figured it out. Cassie came outside with sandwiches, and we sat on the back steps in the afternoon sun, and we talked about the baby, and about names they were considering, and about what the house would need before the due date. I gave no opinions unless asked. I was just there. That evening on my way home, I stopped to see a man named Curtis Webb, who had been my foreman when I had 14 employees and we were doing residential yards out of a trailer. Curtis is 74 now and has been retired for 6 years, and every time I see him I bring him tamales from the place on Highway 90 that he's been ordering from since 1987. We sat on his porch and talked about nothing in particular, about the heat coming in early this year, about his granddaughter's soccer team, about whether the Astros had enough pitching. After a while he said, "Heard you had some family trouble. Word gets around in this industry." I said it was handled. He nodded and looked out at the street. "You know what I always respected about you, Gerald?" he said. "You never made people feel small, even when you could have." I thought about that on the drive home. My grandson was born on a Thursday morning in September. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. They named him James. James Walter Whitmore. Walter being my father's name, which Cassie had suggested and Derek had agreed to without hesitation. I was in the waiting room when he arrived. Derek came out and found me, and he shook my hand and his eyes were red and he said, "Dad, come meet your grandson." I held James for the first time, with the same hands I've used for 40 years to build something out of dirt and seed and the willingness to show up before anyone else. He looked at me the way newborns do, like they're not sure yet what the world is, but they're paying attention. I told him his great-grandfather's name was Walter, and that Walter had taught me that the way you treat work is the way you treat yourself. That a man who respects what he builds is a man worth knowing. James blinked. He didn't have opinions yet. He would. I planned to be there when they arrived. Some people believe the most powerful thing you can give someone is a result. A solved problem. A cleared path. After everything that happened, I could have installed Derek in my company. Could have handed him relationships and contracts and a title. I didn't. I referred him to a mentor I respect, a man who runs a mid-sized operations firm in Austin, and I let Derek make his own call. He took the meeting. He drove to Austin on his own and sat across from a man who didn't know whose father had arranged the introduction, and Derek apparently impressed him. He's been working on a project with that firm for 2 months now. Something small, something real, something he can point to when James is old enough to ask what his father does. That's the thing about shortcuts. They're not actually shorter. They just move the hard part to later, when it costs more and takes longer, and the people watching you are people who matter. Derek is learning that. Cassie is watching him learn it. And somewhere in the next few years, James is going to start paying attention and building his understanding of the world from what he sees. I want to be part of what he sees. Not as a man defined by what he owns or what he drives or what title sits under his name. As a man who showed up, who kept his word, who built something worth building and knew the whole time that the building was never really the point. The point was becoming someone worthy of the building. That's the inheritance I have to offer. I intend to offer it fully. If you've stayed with this story to the end, leave a comment and tell me where you're from. And the next time someone underestimates you, let them. Let them be completely certain about who you are. Then show them.